All right, all right, all right. I don't know how to do the thing where I send the video directly to to a different Facebook group, and I don't know. I know how to do this, so I'll share it this way. And I'm going to be talking about Fate. Okay, going on a little bit of a Fate rant for Fate Core and what it's for. Okay, what I think it's for, what I think its strengths and strong suits and weak points are. Not that this is planned or anything, but I get set off on rants fairly easily. So I'll try my best to keep it as short and concise as I possibly can. Though the only thing I do promise is that I'm probably not going to be doing that. However, Fate Core, right? Or Fate in general. Biggest problem is that many people who look into Fate aren't ready for that type of game. You know, a lot of a lot of players and a lot of GMs feel like they're ready for open-endedness, they're ready to role play, and they're ready to really get into that. And they're not as ready as they thought, because Fate requires, it's so open-ended that it requires a high degree of role play, and a specific type of role play, improv. All right, as my boy Ryan is always saying, it's about accepting the offer, right? When you're creating a Fate character, and when you're playing the Fate game, it's all about creating a situation or narrating the situation in a way that is at least in some way open-ended. You're making an offer, and the people you're playing with have to accept that offer. Um, More important than the players, the GM has to accept that offer. But a good GM will. They'll take it. They actively listen to what's going on. They adapt their storyline and adjust accordingly. That is what Fate, in my opinion, is completely about. Right? It's extraordinarily open ended. However, Fate Core, and to some extent Fate Accelerated, is like what Sam said. It's a toolkit. A toolkit is not a game. Okay? A toolkit is a toolkit. It's what you use to create a game. That's why I think the Fate supplements, the Fate worlds, those are games. Gods and Monsters, Worlds on Fire, they take Fate Core and they add a little bit more structure to Fate Core. Not a whole lot. It's not like adding D&D levels of structure, like this does that, and whatnot. It still allows for a great deal of improv uh, to take place. It's still all about accepting the offer, moving the story around in a collaborative manner, right? But it adds just that little bit of structure that it's missing. It's the same thing with Cipher System, right? If you ever taken the Cipher System rulebook, the core rules for the Cipher System, it's presented, or it was, when it was first released, presented to me as a setting agnostic system, a game, and it's not. It's not a complete system. It is a magnificent toolkit, but that's all it is. It requires structure to be added, certain limitations to be placed within the toolkit for it to be a great game, and it is. Numenera, what's the other one? The Strange, right? They take Cipher System and what they like about Cipher System, and apply certain things to it and make a great game out of the system, which in essence is nothing more than a toolkit. It's the same thing with Fate. Fate is a great toolkit, but it offers very little to people, little selection, I should say. It's so open ended and so minute in the rules that it provides. It leaves, the onus or the responsibility is upon the people playing the game to a great degree. It offers a little bit of structure. Doing all right. Let's go skill system. Right, there's this whole thing about skill system, and essentially all skill systems are all of everything is pretty much the same. Right, you make a roll, and that roll dictates the resolution. That's it. Do you pass? Do you fail? And in Fate, it's a degree of granularity. How well do you pass? How badly do you fail? Do you pass? Do you succeed? At a cost? You know, and that's great. That's as Sam said, it's basically a mechanic that is reproduced in Fantasy Flight Star Wars, um, Fantasy Flight games, Star Wars, the Edge of the Empire and Age of Rebellion and all that. There's a degree of success and a degree of failure that's involved. The approach for which it's reached is completely different, but essentially it's the same thing. You know, when looking at certain games and trying to decide whether you want to play them, whether you want to try them out, me personally, I think it's good to take that step back and examine the rules for what they are. You know, they're simply just an approach, and I think the biggest failing of Fate is the way that approach is given. It's how does it teach people this is what it is and how you use it. That's what I think, and I think people who write the Fate Worlds supplements and other supplements like that, they understand it and they fill in those gaps and they change the approach and structure, which makes it a whole lot of fun to play. Like my favorite Fate World is the Gods and Monsters supplement. My absolute favorite. And it's incredibly, because it's Fate, it's incredibly open-ended. Fights aren't about who's winning initiative. Fights are about the narrative. And whoever has something to interjects something within that narrative. It's that scene. Rather than a combat encounter, it's structured as, this is the scene. The scene is, you've got this monstrous 72-headed monstrosity charging through the forest, barreling through ancient trees, decimating the woodland, the grass underneath its feet, decaying with every, footstep, the ground rumbling as if it's going to crack open, right? And that's the offer made. It's up to the players, any one of them, or them as an entire group, to accept that offer. What do you do? What do you do next? Many RPGs are like this. Or I should say almost every RPG. Every game is really like that. It's just not necessarily seen as such and not taken to that degree. But, what do you want to do? Okay, I've got an aspect or a stunt, expert archer, or, like splitting the shaft, right? Is your aspect. You're an archer character, you're a demigod of archery or whatever, and you're so good that you can fire arrows so on point that you can split the shaft of an arrow already in a target. Okay? Let's say that's an aspect, and that's one you want to invoke in a game of Fate, in a situation like that. Well, I want to shoot him, so I draw back my bow, right? I knock an arrow, and I draw back the bow, focusing between the breastplates of this creature, aiming for where its heart should be. I want to invoke splitting the shaft, right, to gain your bonuses to your rolls, to try to drop this creature, or to try to slow this creature down, But don't say, I want to invoke splitting the shaft to kill this thing. So I want to shoot it with this thing. You're making an offer. You make a roll. The roll will alter that offer in some way. How well do you succeed? If you succeed, and if you fail, and also, how badly do you fail, will alter the offer, right? Let's say you shoot the creature, right? You succeed, it's a great success, you do a lot of, damage to the creature, you don't kill the creature, but it stumbles and falls, right? Takes that arrow right into the chest, its forelimbs give way, its chest and all of its heads barrel down to the ground. It falls with a quake, right? And actually begins like an earthquake. Just for whatever reason, gods and monsters, mythical stuff. And as the GM, I'll update the scene where, the quaking earth or whatever, trembling earth. And I'll add that to the scene. Now, the trembling earth could be used by me, the GM, or by the players, right? But you know, let's say that, and let's, as the GM, invoke again the splitting the shaft aspect of this archer character, right? Because it's all about interpretation and, again, making an offer and accepting the offer. The GM wants to provoke splitting the shaft, right? You think, well, how could something beneficial be provoked? Well, if you're able to shoot, an arrow down the shaft of another arrow, because you're such an expert marksman, maybe that makes you very, it narrows your focus, so you don't see a bunch of things, right? So I want to that invoke that to give you a crazy, like, all right, I want to invoke. It's up to you to accept. You gain a fate point, or you have to spend a fate point to refuse it. And I invoke your splitting the shaft to give you narrow sighted, right? Like that's a penalty that you have to the scene right now. Compel. There you go. Compel. It's been so long since I actually ran a game of Fate. I forget the nomenclature, wording, but yeah, like that's what it is. Every RPG game is essentially that, to different degrees of structure, right? Because role playing is part of the game. Gaming's part of the game too. So keeping an eye out for, invoking, compelling. Is invoking the beneficial one? When you invoke something, that's when you pay the fate point and you get a bonus. Again, it's been a long time since I actually ran or played a game of Fate. But yeah, like the conflict resolution isn't about resolution per se, right? The way Fate is structured, the way Fate Core is structured, it's not about resolution at all, as far as I can remember. It's just about the ebb and flow of this narrative, of this story, or of the scene within this story. Ultimately, the scene will come to a close, and there will be a resolution. But until that resolution is achieved in a natural way, in a way that is beneficial for the overall story, it's about that ebb and flow, that give and take. I found the same problem with to a certain extent about gameplay. I found that Dungeon World, Uncharted World, and Uncharted Worlds have that same issue, right? And to a certain extent, even Fantasy Flight Games, right? Chalice and Chains, the skill system specifically is for task resolution, but narrative is key in all things. Yeah, it's about a task resolution. It's not about the scene resolution. It's not about the resolution of what's going on specifically. In the example I sort of came up with before about shooting this giant monster in the chest, the resolution is whether or not your arrow lands. It's not whether or not, I'm going to shoot him in the chest and it's going to cut him in half and explode in this awesome thing. And ha ha ha, I am a demigod, unstoppable. It's not about that. It's, the resolution is you shot it. It's a resolution to the task at hand, not a resolution to the scene. Right? You can succeed that task, right? Or you can fail that task. But whether, and you can also get it to a certain degree of success and failure. Now, those degrees of success and failure alter the offer. The offer is that I'm shooting this thing. I want to stop it. That's the offer. I want to stop it. I want to shut it down. I want to kill it. That's the offer, right? And whenever you're playing, I know but for anybody else watching, whenever you're playing an RPG game, sit down. Whenever, it's like you as a player goes, I stab this thing in the face, let's say, right? Or I run to the, I fly. You're a mage, right? I fly above the orc war boss, and that's leading his horde, and I cast web. But what I want to do is I want to web him and still hold on to the webbing of my spell and fly away with him, trapping him, right? and the GM just goes, no. How much fun is that? Like, no. That sucks. The GM, you made an offer, right? The GM is not accepting that offer. They're straight out refusing it. That ends the narrative of that action right there. And that puts a complete stop, in what's happening. Now, if there was a character, like if you were proposing that as a plan, and the character says, no, that's not a good plan, you don't want to do that, or do you really have the master of magic, mastery over magic to perform such a thing? Open up a conversation. Like, you cast web on the Orc War Boss while you're flying, right? Fine, it happens. The Orc War Boss is now pulling on the web to pull you towards him. That's an offer to the player. Right? The Orc War Boss, maybe he needs to roll his task, his skill, his strength. Regardless of the game, the Orc War Boss now has to generate some random number to see whether or not the task succeeds or fails in a binary system, as you said, or what degree of success or failure the Orc War Boss has to pull down this mage that wants to take him. And it's up to the mage to react. Do they let go of the web? Do they try to hold on and muscle this Orc War Boss? It's a continual conversation. Role-playing is... I understand, Sam, like when you said about, like, some people just want to play a tabletop role-playing game. Like, I hit it with this, I stab it in the face, I kill it, I move on to the next opponent. I kill that opponent, I move on to the next opponent. And I'm standing strong by saying this. That's not what a tabletop RPG is for. That's what board games are for. There are board games with role-playing elements. You want to play Descent? You play Descent. You want to play what is the zombie game? Can't see it from here, but Pathfinder, the card game. Like, you want to play Warhammer or the Infinity by Corvus Belli. Malifaux, the tabletop game, War Machine or Hordes. Those are games that are about exactly that. They're about, you gathering up your forces, you're playing them, you move on, you attack, you fight over something, and you move on. Which they can be played with tabletop elements, with role-playing. Your character has a name, describe them. You could describe their actions, but essentially the object of the game is to fight, win, move on. Fight, win, move on. Right? A tabletop game, tabletop RPG is about so much more than I fight, I win, I move on. It's about the story. It's about, how do we come to this point where we're fighting? How do we win? What do we need to do? Can we win? And, what happens after we win, besides just moving on? It's about so much more. And I think while you can have fun, fight, win, move on, in a tabletop game, fight, win, move on, that could definitely be fun. But it's fun without utilizing the full breadth and scope of what a tabletop RPG is about. And if you're going to approach tabletop RPGs with the I fight, I win, I move on, then yeah, Fate is not for you at all. Even like the Cypher system, Numenera, it's not for you at all. It's very few games would be for you. Maybe that's why D&D is such a popular system, because its entire structure is about fighting, winning, and moving on. There's no... Okay, it's introduced in the DMG, but there's really nothing in between. There aren't any mechanics for any real social interaction, social resolution, or social conflict. Which is also something that Point of Inspiration is doing with Subari. They're trying to introduce something about conflict and conflict resolution within the mechanics that is not centered specifically around combat. I've got my opinions and stuff on that, but I've already voiced them with them. But as far as Fate, And when I said Fate is bad for some players, what I meant to say I can understand how some players and GMs would see Fate as a bad system because of the way it's presented as a system. It is confusing, you know. Once you understand it, that confusion sort of goes away. But it's got a learning curve that's a bit steep for a lot of people. In the same way as the learning curve for Dungeon World, which I think is freaking amazing. But that whole like saving the resolution to the end of the scene is so hard for people to do. It's like when I actually ran live here once, the one Uncharted Worlds game that I ran, and I was trying to ask you what was happening, is because during running that game, there was a fight scene, right? And the fight scene, you know how in Uncharted Worlds, the roll is the resolution for the scene, and everything up until that resolution is role playing the scene, right? As far as I understand Uncharted Worlds. Well, the roll was made, and I was role playing the conflict of the scene, and the player who made the roll, didn't understand it. They thought that they just won, and that they blow up somebody in the face. It was all about the people playing. While they were role playing a bit, they were never really accepting the offer. It was about, this is what I do. I'm awesome. Screw everything else. Screw everyone else. I'm the best. Look at me. I resolve it. I do this. It's not about, or the way I've seen it so much, and it drives me mad, is where a lot of people and players are all about, okay, you've got this giant in your face. What do? I kill it. I jump up and I slice it in the throat and its head goes rolling. This is my attack roll. Ha. I do. Really? Like, why is it just about that? Why does it so often have to be about that? It's more than just being about that. Right? I mean, you could do that at the end, but it's like, no, I just wanna do the thing in the man. That's why, like, okay, like in Saturday Morning Tabletop, right? The GM has a mechanic for their evildoers called Live Another Day. To try to make it balanced, they pay the players an experience point for their evildoers to live another day. So they come up with some convoluted, cartoony reason or comic booky reason for how the evildoer escaped their fate, right? To counteract that attitude of, I see it, I kill it, I move on. Where's the fun story about that? Stories are all about, this is the bad guy. We got to work up to stop this dude, right? We get into the conflict with this oppressive force, and we do what's necessary. It's about, what do you need to do to stop this oppressive force, right? And if you go and you go head to head with this thing, your BBEG or whatever, and you win, but the bad guy survives or gets away, it's an ongoing story. Now, eventually, you should capture, apprehend, lock up, or even kill this bad guy, this oppressive force. But it's not about doing it right away. Like, where's the fun in that? Where's the story in that? Where's the role play in that? And I think that Fate, and primarily Fate Worlds, highlights that. And that's what confuses people, or what makes people move away. The fact that it highlights that you need to be able to accept that offer. And it's not about coming to a direct resolution to a scene at any given moment. What do you say right there? If you try to play UW or DW like D&D, it's going to be highly unsatisfying. Yeah, it is. I mean, you can structure things in a very, Tolkien-esque D&D way, but the method in which you play is so liberating that I don't think certain people are that type of player, and they misconstrue how this game can be played, what the power and ability of any given system might be, because of the way, one, the system is presented, and two, what it allows the player to do. You know, Dungeon World, not so much, right? Dungeon World is very close and does a really good job with its presentation as far as how it can be played. But like, yeah, Uncharted Worlds or even Masks, you know, to a certain extent, Masks is, it's not about like your stats, all right, your ability scores, your skills in Masks, they don't even stay the same. They change throughout gameplay. So the bonuses and penalties that they would provide are changed throughout gameplay. But that's part of how the game is structured. That's part of how the story in Masks is told, and the type of story that the system wants you to tell about, you know, the internal and emotional struggles with what the hell you are. You know, you're a superhero, you're this, you're that, you're a bundle of hormones because you're basically going through that area of your lifetime where so many changes chemically, physically, and emotionally that you're going through. Right? Uncharted Worlds, I've started not to like it simply for the fact that I had a bad experience with it, and it wasn't a fault of the system so much as a fault of how the system was perceived and thus played. You know, and I think that's another fault of Fate. Though Fate it's structured badly, and it is left too open for the majority of people that would or could enjoy Fate. You know, that's why I like Fate Worlds. They add that little bit. Like, tell me right now, right? Don't the Fate supplements, the supplements using, like, powered by Fate, the things that are powered by Fate are often very good. You know, because they add the requisite structure, and that structure gives you a direction. You know, a direction for which you can play. And people need that, or some people need that, some don't. But it's, you know, it's good, and Fate also highlights something that I see in the community as something that's happening all too often, which is the lack of teamwork. You know, and not just vestigial teamwork. No, the actual teamwork, right? Because, like, what is it? Compel. There we go. Players can compel aspects of other players and even of themselves during gameplay, right? And if you're playing a game of Fate, if you say, all right, we're going to be playing Fate, however, the setting that I'm using, you know, we're playing Fate Core, but we're playing Fate Core in the modern age, near future, right? We're playing Mad Max in Fate. Now, the way Fate is structured, it's completely possible for you to play a dragon. You just, okay, I have aspect, you know, burning soul because of my dragon breath, scales like steel, you know, magnificent wings. Like, these are your aspects that you're giving your character because you want to play a dragon, a fire-breathing dragon. But the offer that the GM, the person running this game, the person telling this story, the person who you know, set it all up, gathered you all together, the offer was, we're going to play a game, a Mad Max game, The Road Warrior. And here you are, completely stifling that offer, saying no, and turning around and making a dragon. Within the rules of the game, it's perfectly possible. But that's not being a team player. That's not respecting the time, effort, and enjoyment of everyone else that is going to be partaking in that. Not just your GM, but your fellow players. You know, if the other guys make Mad Max characters, you know, they're like, oh, you know, they roleplay their guys, they got rubber tires, shoulder pads. One is like, oh, I want to be a master of chains, and fights with chains, and has chains written up, you know, wrapped up all around them, and all sorts of craziness. One is a former stunt car driver, right? Like, so he's like the driver in the group, and the rest of the group works together, and they're on board. They accepted the offer for which the GM made, and, you know, your antisocial ass is going around making a dragon because you can. You're not going to fucking enjoy it. You're not going to enjoy Fate at all, and I think that's the problem. you know? And it's not a problem so much of the system as the people playing it. If the system was written in such a way that didn't allow it, then of course they can't make a dragon because they can't. But if given the option to do so mechanically in the game, in the rules, then they can. And then it could ruin your experience. And I think that's the worst part of Fate Accelerated or Fate Core the way it is. The powers in Fate Worlds. I think I've been ranting too damn long. When I say rant, I'm gonna rant. I was trying to keep this short, but it's like 30 minutes or something already, so I'm gonna shut up. I am who I am. I got ideas. You want to talk more about it? Whatever. Bye.